listening to the Hellhorse Show podcast, your source for unscripted conversations about the latest topics in the Mustang performance space, including our own projects, products, and news. Hosted by the founder of Hellhorse Performance himself, Jeff Gray. Now, let's get started.
Hey, thanks for listening in again to episode 4 of the Hellhorse Show, the Hellhorse podcast, where we cover all sorts of topics, conversations, ramble on, talk about nothings for quite a while. Once again, joined by Sam Reeves. How you doing today, Sam?
I am surviving here at home, like most of you all are.
Sitting around in your underwear, drinking coffee all day?
Yeah, I put pants on, but that's just because I roommate, so.
Well, you know, they might appreciate that for sure. Hey, I know we want to cover a bunch of different topics today and go a little bit more in depth, and this will probably be a little bit of a longer podcast for our listeners, but I guess we'll do a quick update on COVID-19, how it's impacting us. We talked about it in episode 3, but it's probably been, about a week since we've recorded that. Yeah. So business is still the same as usual. Some shipping times have changed. We've noticed that UPS and FedEx aren't really guaranteeing deliveries anymore. And that's just kind of, I don't mean guaranteeing deliveries. I mean guaranteeing dates on deliveries. So it might say it's going to show up Tuesday, but in reality, it might show up Thursday is kind of what we're tracking. But we're still shipping. All the vendors we work with are still getting us product. Auto repair in most areas is considered an essential service. And we're still rocking and rolling, trying to get stuff out. Appreciate you guys being patient with us on some of this stuff. Obviously, shipping and lower employee counts or social distancing, things that companies are putting in place or changing shifts impacts getting stuff in here. But, you know, I would say, Sam, even the Dash and radio stuff were probably pretty well unaffected outside of just shipping times taking a little bit longer. Am I correct?
we had a little bit longer. Actually, a lot of international stuff is sped up now. Actually, Europe's still pretty quiet, but you know, like coming from Asia and stuff like that, I've actually noticed they've been much more on point lately. But as in the U.S., some stuff slowed down, but a lot of stuff is just, you know, not by much. It's just a day or two, luckily. But, of course, things change suddenly. And, Amazon, I get some supplies from Amazon here and there, and Amazon has been really hard to get a lot of things from right now. So that's been an issue
funny,
finding alternate suppliers.
I don't know if I told you the story earlier. What's funny is, it's not funny. I ordered some heat shrink, like a 2,500 pack of like heat shrink wire connectors for like our fuel systems and to have here for repairs and things like that, or to fix people's shoddy wiring work. I ordered that, and then like $450 and the $525 fuel pumps. It's actually cheaper for me to buy the filters that clip onto the pumps on Amazon from some of these people. I don't know where they're getting them from, but to get the filters from there than directly. And I ordered, I think, 150 of those the other day off Amazon through Prime delivery. They're like, it'll be there in 2 days. I got an email yesterday that says your order is expected to arrive April 23rd due to delays of COVID-19. Yep. I'm like, I don't think I pay for Prime for this to take a month. Like,
yeah, Amazon's changed stuff up. They're prioritizing medical stuff, etc. I get it, but it's a little frustrating.
I'm like, a month?
One of the things that's actually been harder to get is the CarPlay USB hubs, believe it or not. They've been slow to come in, and I'm having trouble stocking them, so I'm shipping them direct from Ford, but sometimes they've even been taking several days to ship them, and I mean, everything's just a little slower. It seems like nothing's stopped, but it's just a little slower.
Right. I don't say anything stopped. I would agree with that it seems a little bit slower. I've had UPS change the delivery date on some customers on this side of who I talk to by like a week. They're like, hey, it's going to show up Wednesday, and now it's saying like Tuesday of the following week. So obviously some things are going on in pieces that are out of our control, and we appreciate everybody working with us on that. But we're still moving at about the same speed that we normally do anyways, given, you know, any shortcomings of trying to get stuff back in stock to restock and ship. So that's just a little update for you guys. Nothing else going on. We're not posting on social media all this, oh my God, panic and craziness stuff that everybody else is. Still here, still going about our business in the normal way and looking at the positive side of things, and making sure that when the racetracks open or some of these restrictions across the country are lifted, you guys have your cars set up the way you want it for car shows, the street, the track, whatever it is. If you got any questions on ship times, obviously you can send a ticket to support@hellhorseperformance.com. and we'll give you the best answer we can on anything that's going on, or if there's shipping delays in your area for some of these areas that are on super lockdown or anything that we've noticed. So feel free to reach out as it is. Otherwise, everything's kind of shipping normal for all of us here. I guess I'll on the shipping note, Sam, let me turn to you on updates for dash lead times, radio lead times, maybe, and give everybody a quick status update at the beginning of this of where we're at on all that. And then we're getting a lot of inquiries. I think you're seeing them too on the GT500 digital dash. And
yeah, it was odd this year. It's been, or not this year, this week. There's been a lot of interest, and just, after being quite slow last week, this week has suddenly drummed up a lot of interest in a lot of things. And the GT500 cluster is one of them. I don't think we talked about that one in the podcast. So GT500 cluster, 220 mile an hour speedo, which a lot of people want. It's an automatic only cluster. It's unlike the Bullet cluster. You can't take it and switch the transmission because the Bullet only came in manual, and we have been able to make it work in an auto transmission car. It does not work that way with the GT500. You could stick it in a manual car, but it's not going to turn off. It's not going to work right. People have done it. And if you really want to do it, we can do it for you. But just disclaimer, it's not necessarily going to all work right. In an auto car, it works. However, you lose remote start, maybe. Some people have said it doesn't work. Some people have said it works. And I unfortunately don't have a test car here, so I haven't really been able to try to dig into getting that fixed. And if it's a programming issue, if it's car by car, I don't know. Remote start doesn't work and steering modes don't work. However, if you have Sync 3 and the drive mode switch, drive modes do work, and the steering mode will change from normal to sport if you go to sport or track modes. However, you cannot use comfort mode anymore. That mode is now gone, but who needs that? Come on.
Yeah, most people are putting their car in sport or drag mode anyways. Right. Yeah, that's curious about remote start. I didn't even think about the fact that for some folks it's working. I wonder if that has something to do with build date or build time, or
I'm not 100% sure. It could be a BCM thing. I have, to be completely honest, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at it. I've spent some time, but it's possible, if you have a 2015 and older BCM programming versus an 18, with the newer BCM programming might not have an issue. So it's hard to tell at this point. I don't have any test vehicles. It's kind of a bad time to get test vehicles, to get people to, everybody. I did actually have one test vehicle, and that's how I verified it would work at all. But it was a friend of mine, and her car is her daily driver, and I couldn't leave it torn apart in my garage for days. It was more like you have 2 hours type thing. So that's what I had. So we'll see. Hopefully can get more info on that in the future. But that's where we are for the GT500. It does cost more. It costs us more to get them. That's why we upcharge it. So just know that if you're ordering that, A, those are things that won't work. B, it does cost more. So
right. And obviously the best way to get information on that is stay tuned to our social media, listen to the podcast. We'll always spend the first few minutes of these podcasts kind of covering some stuff that we have in the past, any updates, things like that. So that information usually be available in the first 15 minutes or so of any upcoming podcast. So, or if you have questions, again, send us an email, and we can talk about it from there. I know we're also doing some changes with the Sirius XM product line. Sam, we've lowered the price for the upgrade initially, and then we're also going to launch we want to launch a standalone product so people that want to upgrade to Sirius XM later can.
Right. So we've lowered the price if you bundle it with our kit. So if you purchase a 4 to 8 inch kit, you want to add Sirius XM, or if you we actually haven't changed this yet, but if you order a 2 to 3 kit, and I believe all Sync 2 vehicles have Sirius XM, but if you want to add HD radio, you can do that as well with the Sync 2 to 3 kits. So we lowered the bundle price. The reason being is I have an excess stock of them. We need to get rid of some. So we lowered the bundle price, help you guys out. It works great. Most of the time there should be no programming involved. If there is, I'm happy to help you with that. The standalone unit is for anybody who has done a 4 to 8 inch upgrade. So if you've already done one of our upgrades, you've done somebody else's upgrade, you can go ahead and put in our Sirius XM receiver. And if it's our upgrade, it will just work. You're going to have to go start your free trial with Sirius XM, or if they don't let you do a free trial, just, subscribe. We include the antenna. We include what you need for that. Same thing with HD radio. Same thing with people who've done a 2 to 3 upgrade, whether it's ours or somebody else's or their own. If you want to add HD radio, we can go ahead and get you that receiver as well. The one big thing is if you just look at our price, we charge $197 for the Sirius only upgrade if you're doing it after the fact, $297 for the HD only after the fact, and it's discounted if you bundle it with our kit. Our competitors charge way more than that, and it is exactly the same. There's no difference. It works the same. It's the same part numbers. They're just, honestly, I hate to say it, they're price gouging. But that's where we are with that upgrade, and hopefully we can help some of you guys out by lowering that price with the bundle. If you've purchased a kit recently, you're waiting on a kit, last 4 months, and you want to add it, you just didn't want to spend the extra at the time, we're happy to discount it and give you the bundle price now since you recently purchased that. So just shoot us an email.
Right. Or if you have an order ticket from the ticketing system going up and going, just respond to that. So that way we can keep track of your order number. Yeah, I mean, I guess the goal will probably be by this weekend to have that standalone product up. It'll kind of be like the 4 to 8 inch wiring harness that we offer. It'll still be found in that digital goods section. Or the interior section. I'll make sure it's near the top of the website so people can see it, or I'll throw it up on Instagram stories with a link so that they can find it that way as well. Another big thing I'm getting a lot of questions about that I guess we can briefly talk about before we get into the meat and potatoes, as you could say, of this podcast is, can I buy a Hellhorse package 850 or Hellhorse 1200 package car with 0% from Ford? And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because you and I have been looking and talking to different Ford dealers, and everybody's kind of got a different answer right now about the whole 0 for 84%.
Yeah, it's a fun topic because these times it kind of make it interesting for people who want to buy a new car, people who didn't know they wanted to buy a new car.
Right. The short answer is yes. If you qualify and the vehicle you're on qualifies for 0 at 84 months, from our partner over at Joe Myers, so they can acquire the vehicle you need that qualifies for 0 to 84 months. And I say that because I've got some people telling me that it applies to 2020s and some people telling me it doesn't apply to 2020s. And maybe by the time we publish this podcast live and people listen to it in a few days, it might very well go to 2020. So I want to be very top level, not dig very deep.
And we're not financial advisors, and
I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a Ford dealer. The simple answer is if you pick a vehicle and you qualify for the 0 for 84%, if you and the vehicle qualify for that 0% for 84 months, and you're interested in our pre-built 850 or 1200 horsepower packages from Joe Myers Ford, you can put all the boost on the 0% if you meet the qualifications that are required for that to happen. So yes, our package cars from them do qualify for the discounts. I'm getting that question a lot because it's a very interesting time for people to be able to maybe boost their car and not have to pay interest on anything and break it up. Get with us if you need more details. Get with Cedric over at Joe Myers Ford. He's my go-to guy on that stuff over there. Tell him Jeff from Hellhorse sent you over there to find a car, and you can always reach out to us for more details on that. But all the information I have, as long as you and the vehicle you're looking at qualify, you can 0 for 84 your boosted car if that's what you're looking to do, or you've been interested in it and just trying to figure out how to get the payments a little bit lower. I mean, if you can do it with 0%, your payment's going to be quite a bit lower.
Well, they normally charge like a minimum of 5.95% on the 84 months. So that's a huge savings.
It is a huge savings. I know 2019 models are running out across the country. I think that's why some of these dealers are getting Ford to do it on 2020s. That's why I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that. But I would make the assumption that because 2019 inventory has pretty much been sold out since October or November, most dealerships that I've talked to, it's going to roll to 2020s. But again, you can get with us. You can get with Cedric over at Joe Myers Ford. Give him a call. Let him know we sent you that direction. You're looking for an 850 or 1200 horsepower Hellhorse car. But it should, I mean, it is, again, as long as those two qualifiers meet, 0 for 84 is a viable option for guys that want to buy 850 and 1200 package cars.
And just a couple more bits of info on this Ford financing. Call your dealer if you have any questions, really, because they know all the answers. But this is just from what I have heard. It's not set in stone by any means. Ford Credit changed it so you only have to have a minimum 620 FICO score to qualify for the 84-month financing. That doesn't mean 0%. They didn't say a FICO score for 0%. But if you've been looking for that really long financing and you have a little lower credit score, then now you can qualify for it. The other thing is with 84-month financing, a lot of times you lose some incentives. So with the 0%, it might be worth it depending on how expensive a vehicle you're buying, but definitely do the math. Figure out if a higher payment might save you more money in the long run if you can afford the higher payment.
Right. I think
you might lose $4,000 in incentives. It's, and then you might end up spending more than $4,000 in interest otherwise.
Right. Talk to their finance department, talk to your financial advisor. We're not giving you financial advice. I'm just getting a lot of questions about if I can buy a Mustang for 0 for 84, can I get a Hellhorse package on that program? The short answer is yes. You got to meet all the qualification and criteria and work with a dealer on that. And you need to do your own research, your own math. We're not giving you financial advice, telling you what to do. All those.
And there are some good incentives now, especially if you can find any 2019s, you can get them for great deals.
You can get them for great deals, and even if you had to take a 2020, which the MSRP went up $3,000 or $4,000 on base models, I mean, it's just an interesting time that if you could get 0% and build the race car you want, 100% financed on a payment structure, it's an interesting time. Just because, again, people are asking about it. I mean, you and I have been looking. I wish the GT350 would qualify for it, or the GT500. Things of that nature, or some of the stuff you and I are interested in would qualify for that promo, but it doesn't, no matter how much I beat up.
Even standard interest rates are cheap. If you want to buy a used car and you have decent credit, I mean, they're pretty low interest rates right now.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, talk to your Ford dealership, call Cedric to Joe Myers Ford if you're interested in that. If you're just trying to get a Mustang at 0 for 84% and somehow haven't heard that that's going on, talk to your local Ford dealer, and it's an interesting time to be buying a Mustang. That's for sure.
Something I wanted to add, since we've been, I was looking at possibly buying a GT350. Now I think I've decided to keep my Mustang and maybe buy something else, which I'm not sure yet, since it's hard to buy a car in a lot of states right now. Actually, you still can in Missouri, but in a lot of states it's become, they're not allowed to sell cars. They're only allowed to work on them.
A lot of dealerships are closed right now.
Right, exactly. And so I can't actually buy a car if I wanted to out of this state. And of course, I always like to look at cars that are not in this state because that's just how I am. But with the GT350, we've been talking about this, and they changed quite a bit in 2019. And then halfway through 2019, they actually changed the engine to be the Generation 2. And Jeff and I have talked about this. And there's a great post on Mustang 6G that tells you what's upgraded. Basically, the GT350 and the 350R engines are now identical. They're not different. Ford has said it will take 12 pounds of sustained boost, no problem now. It's supposedly it's sharing more parts. The GT500 is supposedly a way better engine. Well, I wouldn't say way better, but a better engine. So easy way to tell if the 2019 you're looking at has the Gen 2 engine. In the engine bay, there's a plaque on the passenger side on the fuel rail, and it shows a signature of who built the engine. If there's one signature, it's a Gen 2. If there's two signatures, it's a Gen 1. So if it's a Gen 1, I don't know if you can get it cheaper. Probably not. The dealers probably don't care. But, man, they have some good deals on 2019 GT350s because there are several left around the country I've seen.
We did see some down here in Texas, and I think up
there's
in Illinois.
There's like 4 here in St. Louis.
They were all under $60,000.
Yeah, with tech pack. But that's something else, though, is the 2019 tech pack comes with the heated and cooled seats. The 2020 has the same exact stuff the 2019 tech pack has, but it has the Recaros. And I know a lot of people like those Recaros. So that's just one interesting difference between the 2019 and 2020 tech pack that they changed.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting too, I don't know if you've heard anything about it, is I'm seeing a lot of stories popping up about 2020 and 2019 Gen 2 motors popping. Have you seen
really?
that?
No, I have not.
Yeah. Like I keep getting articles or tagged and stuff on Facebook.
Hand-built motor problems
of them blowing up. I don't know if it's the same problem or a different problem. I mean, the revision was supposed to take care of it. I don't know, but Mustang 6G's got a couple of guys that have had problems. One guy had to wait like 6 months to get a motor when they were coming through. So I'm kind of curious to see if the Gen 2 is really going to hold up.
I think it will. There might have been again, first new anything, especially when it's hand built, sometimes you see issues, but of course you don't ever hear about the ones that work. You only hear about the ones that don't work. So,
well, and I see a lot of people going, well, then these cars just aren't worth it. The flat plane crank or whatever, this design, the Voodoo, the
Well, to be honest, my opinion is the flat plane crank is stupid, but it's a marketing gimmick, which it is. But it sounds really cool, so that's about it.
Yeah, you look at like Gavin with a built GT350 with a flat plane crank. It's great. I think I've heard different shortcomings on the GT350, and I've heard some things from tuners where they think the issue is when the car's knocking, because I guess two cylinders are firing at once is the best way to put it in comparison. I know, without getting into the weeds of it, it can't tell which cylinder is actually causing the problem, and that's what's causing them to go boom. And I mean, that's not causing but they can't troubleshoot what's actually going on with what. Based on that, I've heard that's a problem. So I don't know if that's part of the issue or what. But it's interesting. I've heard that could be a problem. I've heard some people say, "Oh, it's a high compression," but that's not really the case because these 18s aren't blowing up. I'm not going to go into the tick thing and people overreacting to the stupid tick.
I think they had some issues with the 18, but I know they had revised and adjusted. Same thing with the MT82. That's the thing is first year cars almost always have issues, except in, like you buy some brands seem to not, like Porsche. It seems like none of their cars ever have issues. But first year, I bought a 2020 Escape. I don't know why I bought another first year car because I had so many problems with my Continental that was first year, and my Escape's already in the dealer for the engine just shutting off on me while driving. So it's just like it has like 1,000 miles on it. First year car, new platform, new engine. It's just you got to let them work through it. So I don't recommend buying first year cars. And maybe that's the same with this engine. It's the old design, but it's a new design. It's first year engine. So maybe wait for 2021 if you want a Gen 2 Voodoo, or maybe find a 2019 with the Gen 1 and you'll get the latest revision of that motor. So I don't know what the right call is, but there's a call.
I was seeing those stories of where they're starting to come out slowly. I don't know if they're being kept under wraps or if people just see, GT350 blew up. But I started noticing it was a lot of 19s and 20s. And I'm like, wait a minute. I know 19s, there was a cutoff to where they became Gen 2 motors, and there was kind of hit and miss in the beginning. But 2020s shouldn't be blowing up based on what they're saying.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. They're still new. I don't think we really saw any 2020 GT350s till this year. I don't think they had any built last year. I haven't seen any with the build data last year yet. I've seen a lot of them seem to have just been popping up, so I don't know why that is, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. We'll see where it goes. I just found that as interesting. I didn't know if you had heard anything about it, or you're like, oh yeah, I know a guy that's had the problem.
Yeah, I haven't.
This, that, and the other thing.
Seems like everybody I know have a 16.
Yeah. 16s, 17s.
Right. Which had the most issues with oil consumption and whatnot.
Yeah. That's, I don't know. I'm not hearing oil consumption issues in the Gen 2 motors, but there are randomly blowing up. So I guess on that note, we can kind of move on to the meat and potatoes of this. Do you want to start with suspension or boost? What would you like to start with?
Oh, I don't care. It's up to you.
Well, I'll let you pick. You can lead the conversation this time.
Well, we've talked about boost enough. Let's just go into suspension. We can add boost later. I had a couple people who wanted to hear more about suspension types on S550s. There's so many options out there. You have every different type of racing. Are you just going to have your car on the street? Are you going to have your car on the track? Is it road course? Is it drag racing? Is it autocross? Is it drifting? There's so many different options. And a lot of people, I believe, make mistakes when they choose their suspension setups. Now, drag setups, I think a lot of times people don't make mistakes because I feel that they're more straightforward. But a lot of people don't think as much about what they want out of their car. Me included, I've made mistakes. But a lot of it's A, about budget, and then B, about what you want out of the car. Is it your daily driver? If it's your daily driver, I don't recommend sticking some linear 8 springs and track dampers on. It's going to ride like complete ass and making everything solid. You just don't want that. It's not fun. If it's a track toy, you're going to strip the interior out. Well, then go ahead, go full $3,000 coilovers, everything solid, solid diff mounts, everything. And you will feel one with that car, but you will not want to drive it on the street. So I don't know what you want to start with. I don't know a whole lot about drag suspension.
All I really deal with is drag suspension.
I know.
Everybody wants to go fast, and you're out there on autocross tracks and circle tracks or whatever you do. And I know your other buddy, who I call Thing Number 2, Sam Number 2, does drifting. It'd be great to get his opinion at some point. But drag suspension is what I'm most familiar with. Most people that are contacting me want to know how to go fast. And fast comes down to suspension as well. I guess we could start with your side of it to kind of change it up, and I can talk about drag suspension a little bit on the flip side, because I think it's pretty well beaten, or it's pretty easy to get a hold of me and talk about that, because there's going to be a variation of setups, but I can hammer it out. But let's just start with your side of what you know and understand, and your recommendations. Maybe not necessarily products specifically, but
right, understood.
Here's a great thing for the street. Here's a great thing for the track. Here's a great mixed use street track combo. Sure. If you're trying to get away with it.
If you're low budget, you want street, you want maybe a little better handling, you want a little bit lower, you just want that good look. Honestly, keep it super simple. Just go with springs, because progressive rate springs will be nice and comfortable, give you just ever so slightly better handling, and will give you that lower look you want. That's how I started. I just did some decently low springs and spacers, which I don't actually recommend for the track, but still, and it's a good look. So that's the lowest budget thing. You can spend a lot of money in suspension. My current car, people it's mostly a track car. I do drive it on the street, but it's actually linear 8 springs and track dampers. And then there's actually a lot of things people don't know about the S550 suspension, and where they have different rubber bushings versus bearings. The performance package actually has a lot of little suspension upgrades people don't know about. One of the front control arms is a bearing instead of a bushing. It has a different geometry than the non-performance package. In the rear, the toe link has a bearing instead of a bushing where it meets the subframe. However, it's still a bushing where it meets the knuckle. So that can be replaced with a bearing. The front, actually one of the biggest things, which actually screws up alignment, which I don't know why, but people tell me it does. It screws up alignment. And it gives you the most movement in the rear suspension is the front control arm bushing. And that's a pain to replace. It's a Preston bushing, and you press it out and you put a bearing in there, and it really tightens up that rear end going around a track. And that's one of the first things I did. I actually dropped my entire rear subframe out of the car and upgraded a whole bunch of stuff at one time, including the toe links, adjustable camber arms, all that stuff. And I spent a lot of money on that suspension. And that, of course, the best track setup is going to be fully adjustable coilovers, three-way coilovers, all the solid stuff, though I really don't recommend solid diff bushings. You can do the really stiff inserts. Don't go solid though, because if you really want to do it right, you have to press out the bushings in there and replace them with bearings, and it's hard on the drive line, and it's just so painful to drive. I had a buddy who did that, and you get every little drive line, you feel every little drive line thing. And if you're making a race car, okay, go ahead and do that. But I'm not, I'm trying to still drive the car on the street some. So coils are by far going to be the best. You just got to do it right. You need to get it quarter balanced. You need to definitely play with the adjustment. And that's one of the reasons I actually haven't done coils, is because I don't want to spend hours and hours playing with the adjustment. And I know a lot of people who have done just that. And maybe I'll go coils. Excuse me. Ugh. Maybe I'll go coils eventually, but at this point, it's just not necessary. So the big things to start if you're doing autocross track build is springs and struts, and probably camber plates in the front. It's not a necessity, but it definitely helps. For track suspension, you want like between -2 and 3 degrees of camber all around. That rear control arm front bushing, replace that with a bearing. That's another big one. And then I also recommend the bump steer reduction tie rod on the front. But honestly, if you stick with those basics and just the various bushing support, like they make subframe support and alignment things, and then the diff bearing support or bushing supports, those simple things, those will get you started to have a much better handling car without really ruining how it handles. As the struts go, the Ford Performance track struts are great. They're just really stiff. If you want something a little softer, you can go like Kona Yellows or something. There's a lot of great options. I think even American Muscle makes their own or something like that. But there's a lot of good options out there, and I'm sure we sell several of them, Jeff. I don't know, or if we don't, we probably should. But
yeah, what brand? Like
the Kona Yellows.
Oh yeah, I think they're on the website. If they're not, we have them. I use those on some of the drag setups for when guys don't want to go to a Viking coilover, or a Viking coilover is not appropriate in the beginning for what they're trying to do. I just put them on Kona Yellows that are adjustable.
They're also good for around the track. You don't even need to adjust. If you want adjustable, go coilovers. If you don't care about adjustable, or if you don't want to do coilovers, rather, I recommend doing the non-adjustable struts just from a sanity standpoint, because they're going to be tuned the way they should be. And that's one reason I do recommend the Ford Performance ones. Just know they definitely ride harder. And unfortunately, Ford Performance stuff has gotten more expensive in the last year because of how they've done dealers and stuff like that, and adjusted how they're doing everything. But they do still make some good parts.
Right. So what if somebody's going to drive it on the street and then take it to the road course, autocross? I don't know what proper term you want me to use for what you're doing. What is kind of your minimum recommended upgrade for a guy just looking for a little enhancement? And then what's your recommendation for the guy that's like, hey, I'm all about doing these events, and if it rides like crap or shit on the street a little bit, or I have to take in some NVH, sure. What's kind of your breakdown? I mean, you don't have to get brand specific, but what's the pieces you're upgrading and changing?
Really, start with springs. And if you can adjust your alignment to get more negative camber, which you can in these cars a little bit, you might need camber bolts in the front, but a lot of times you get enough from lowering it. And in the rear, it's a pain to adjust it, but you can. So start with that. That is the bare minimum. Honestly, take the car around the track stock the first time. Don't do anything, because and this is a mistake a lot of people make when going to do road course for the first time. They're like, oh, I don't want to do road course yet because I got to do all this to my car to prep for it. No, you don't. Have a good set of tires. It doesn't need to be a R888R. Have it can be Pilot Super Sport or Pilot Sport 4 or whatever. It doesn't even have to be that. Just good set of tires. Make sure your brake pads are good. There's a lot of good options. Power Stop Z23 pads are great for street track, or Z26 rather. Great for street track. There's a bunch of options for that. Those are the basics. Change your oil if it's real hot. Up your oil weight is very common. I run 5W50 on the track. A lot of people do. GT350s are 5W50. There's a lot of little things, and I could go on for hours about all the little things that you should do for the track. But be honest, take the car stock, have a good instructor, and just have fun with it, because going around a road course is so much fun to me. I just drag is fun, but it's just road course is so much more fun. It's a lot more work. It's a lot of very tiring. But then if you want to go the next step up, definitely just go ahead and do the rear control arm bearing. I know I keep coming back to that because it's really important. And people are like, how can that be important? It makes a huge difference. It's hard to explain until you do it. Makes a huge difference. Do the subframe support collars. I know multiple companies offer those. Then the diff inserts for the bushings to stiffen that up too. Multiple companies offer those. There's two main suspension companies, of course, and they both offer different ways to stiffen up the subframe to the body of the car. I'd add that, and then I would add dampers. So either Kona Yellows, Ford Performance track struts, coilovers. If you know you're going to go coilovers eventually, keep the stock dampers until you decide you want coils and buy the coils, because it's a waste of money otherwise. Because coils are definitely expensive, but you automatically get the camber caster plates, so you get a lot of that stuff just already ready to go on coils, and coils are great if you're willing to spend the cash on them.
Right. Coilovers are always a great option. I mean, even in the drag world, going to Viking for coilovers makes a total difference on your setup and everything else. Budget wise, if somebody's looking for a basic setup that you're recommending, what kind of price point are they looking at for all the pieces? And then on the most extreme side, what are they kind of looking at spending?
So when I first decided to start tracking my car, the first time I went to the track, literally all that was done to it was springs. I had springs and I ran Pilot Supersport tires I think I was running a 305 rear, 275 front, so a little bit wider tires. And a wider tire on a road course is a real advantage because it helps overheating. It doesn't really help grip a whole lot. It actually helps overheating. A tire compound's the big thing there. But to get to a good place to where I really felt like, next I'd have to spend a lot of money to really go up, you're probably looking about $2,000 to really get all the little stuff together that you need. Plus installation. Of course, I did it all myself. I pulled my rear subframe out, but some of it's easier than others to do. That rear bearing I keep talking about, a lot of people aren't going to be able to do that. If you're comfortable with working on cars, though, I just used a ballpoint press and hit it with an impact for a while, and the thing popped out with some heat. But it's not for the faint-hearted there. And one thing I do like to tell people about working on their own car is what I have found over my 10 years of working on cars or so is it's really not as hard as it looks if you have the right tools. Watch videos, ask people questions. Feel free to ask me questions. I'm happy to help people with installation info or what you need for those things. When I started working on my Mustang, there was a guy I met on Mustang 6G who actually helped with the original digital cluster thing, and he's who got me into the road racing stuff, and he helped me so much on how to decide what to modify, what to do to my car to get extra handling on it, what he's done to his car. And I've actually met him a handful of times, but there's a lot of support in the community. People are happy to tell you about their experiences. People are happy to help you with tips on, the things that they'd recommend you do and not do. But we all start somewhere. Things can seem really intimidating, and then you go ahead and you go in and do it, and you're like, that really wasn't that bad. Like, I've never dropped a rear subframe in a car, and then I have this Mustang that's got like 10,000 miles on it. I'm like, I'm just gonna pull the rear subframe out. And sure enough, it was like, that was stupid easy. Why was I even worried about that? So it's just a matter of experience for sure. But I always tell people you should work on your own car unless it's something. If you're in the engine and you don't know what you're doing, you don't want to destroy something that's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars to fix. But stuff like suspension, a lot of times it's pretty difficult to break it to that point. So that's where I am.
Right. So kind of as a recap, basic to extreme, what's kind of the dollar amount from basic parts, no labor, basic parts to the extreme? What's kind of the range you give people, just kind of as a recap?
Okay, well, there's such a big range. You can spend $10,000 on your suspension if you want to, but half of that's coilovers. You can spend $200 on a set of springs and make things better, and another $100 on an alignment, right?
Right.
then I would say $1,000 to $2,000 range is where you're going to get that. You're still on springs, but you're starting to do all those necessary upgrades. A lot of people talk about quote unquote stop the hop kits is a term I hear. And while I didn't necessarily do specific that, I've done most of the upgrades those come with, which help just tighten everything up. It's all about tightening things up. When you have rubber, it moves around. It definitely helps NVH. It's going to be more comfortable, but things move. And when things move, you don't get that connection. You have less mechanical grip. So it's all about mechanical grip.
Right. I'm with you on that.
But if you want to buy a good set of coilovers, you're going to be up in the $5,000+ range for everything when said and done. Depends. There's so many things you can do. If you're drifting, JTP, a pro drifter, makes an angle kit for the S550s. I doubt you knew that. And it's like WiseFab, which is the biggest angle kit company around, but it can do some insane angle on an S550. And I have no experience driving it on a track, so I can't tell you how it handles, but it actually probably handles decently because they usually have pretty good caster across the whole range of motion and whatnot. So that's just another thing that exists out there that can be done, and that completely changes the front suspension geometry. All the arms are replaced, so it's just another thing out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. They make an angle kit because, like I told you, maybe it was in a previous episode or just you and I talking, is last time I dealt with anything drifting is when I had 240SXs, and I had two of them, and it doesn't really go into drift events with it. But, when you get a rear wheel drive car, or, 20 years ago when I was a teenager, you teach yourself how to drift with it, and you figure out what kind of works and doesn't work and what you need to replace or what's going to snap from going sideways at the same time too.
Drift suspension is relatively easy. I say a cheap set of coilovers, and you really want the adjustable damping because different tires feel differently, different tracks feel differently when doing actual drifting. But honestly, adjustable dampers and a couple other upgrades is really all you need. Or coilovers, not adjustable dampers, which they do have adjustable dampers. But angle kit's great. You don't need to start with angle. My buddy Sam, he has a 2013 S197 Coyote, and his has coilovers and it has modified knuckles. So actually somebody cut where the ball joint or where the tie rod end goes into the knuckle and moved it so he can get more angle out of the kit. And it actually works pretty well. It binds in some places, but for the most part, he doesn't have issues with it. So drift suspension is honestly really easy.
It'll be great to get him on at some point to talk about drift suspension as the topic and
one thing
his experience with it.
Come up is 3-valve S197s have really, I've seen a lot of them drifting now. And I've been told they make really good drift cars and they're getting really cheap. I mean, you can get them for next to nothing these days for 05, 06, Right.
Yeah. I mean, even some S550s with higher mileage are getting cheap and,
oh yeah, well, especially if you go EcoBoost or V6, you can get them for less than $10,000.
But, right? Yeah, we've seen our fair share of those.
But even GTs are getting cheap.
Yeah, GTs are starting to get cheaper, and that's crazy because you would think that wouldn't happen as much because the MSRP, I think the increase from 19 to 20 was like $3,000 or $4,000, and MSRP.
I think there are a lot of them too. I mean, they sold a lot of 2015s and 16s and 70s and 18. I mean, they just sold a lot of Mustangs. So
I mean, that's true. I mean, that's why you see so many.
And there's a lot of speculation on the used car market here. That in the next few months, some people say the price is going to go down, and this is my opinion. The prices are going to go down a little bit in the near future, and then they're going to go up because I believe less people will be buying cars the rest of the year. So there's going to be less used cars on the market, but. Lots of speculation on that. If you have job security though, with that, like we've been talking about earlier, that 0 for 84, now is the time to buy a car. But if you don't have job security, I would not spend the money.
Yeah, it's interesting to me the track suspension that you kind of use, how it kind of compares to drag cars. So I always tell people if you're street strip guy, mostly street guy, roll race guy, Mexico, whatever you want to call it, the big things I always say to do, unless you're a Magna Ride car, and I could talk about that a little bit from what I've seen in experiences.
There are a lot of Magna Ride cars that do drag racing?
Well, like if you look at Lethal's car, Jared has gone 1-2 60 foots with Magna Ride on their 18 or 19 GT. So Magna Ride is a viable option. You look at like Gavin with his GT 350, it's Magna Ride. Alex Alvord has Magna Ride. Jack, Determined Veteran, who was on, I think, the last podcast with us, his GT350R's got it, and he's going to be twin turboing and using it. So Magna Ride's a little bit of a different animal. You need to do all the rear kits and pieces that you can, and obviously you have to get drag springs that are specific for Magna Ride cars, which BMR has a great offering for that. I'm sure Steeda does. I typically deal with a lot of BMR and UPR for suspension products. I've got a mixture of both. I like them both. Obviously, BMR's got a crazy sweet drag racing K member as well, but Magna Ride seems to perform really, really well with just a few upgrades. But if you're a non-Magna Ride car, you're a 300, 301A, 400A, even the 401A PP2 cars that don't have Magna Ride that were custom ordered that way. You can start pretty basic. If you're a street strip guy just looking for the basics to get going, and you're non-Magna Ride, I always say good set of Viking rear shocks if you're boosted. And 99% of what I'm going to talk about is going to be for boosted guys, because 99% of our customer base is boosted. They're not NA. If you've got NA specific questions, obviously hit us up or use this information to tweak it to lower horsepower. But Viking's got the new triple adjustable shocks. I don't have a lot of experience with those. I hear great things, but my tried and true go-to every time for rear shocks is the Viking B3010 AMs that have the upper mount already built into them. Those are 600 plus rated Viking shocks for the rear. BMR drag springs is my go-to. That's what I've had the best luck with. Vertical links, whether they're BMR or UPRs, I like UPRs. I've got UPR on my car and a bunch of customer cars. Can't go wrong either way. And then some sort of stop the hot kit, whether that's I think what they call the cradle lockout arms, those like straight pieces that connect to the subframe and suspension, but some sort of stop the hop kit is really
there's a lot of different parts that go into those.
Yeah, some sort of variation. Yeah, some sort of variation. You don't need to worry about your diff bushings immediately. Obviously, if you're boosted, you should be doing half shafts and drive shafts and things like that. I'm gonna take that and put that to the side and say that's an obvious. You should be doing it unless you love snapping stock parts and continuing to replace them. But starting with that, I mean, that'll give you a great setup. I've had guys with just that setup with half shafts that have 1/360 footed without Magna Ride cars, without having to do all the solid diff bushings and everything else that you had alluded to and mentioned. That is a great way to set up. And you're talking, you can get into that setup for sub $1,000 with everything you need: vertical link springs, Viking shocks, and a stop the hop, a cradle lockout kit from BMR in this instance, or some variation of stopping the hop, and that'll really lock up your rear end significantly well. Yes, there's some other things you should do like bushings and things like that, like you talked about. But if that's really what you're looking for in a budget conscious, that'll do the trick. Vikings are adjustable. You can get those 60 foot down and then do the rest a little bit later on. All the way up to the point, if you're going to go super drag car and don't care about NVH, you can expand on that. You can do the IRS subframe support braces.
Yeah, anything you solid up, it's going to add NVH, but
it's going to add
anything
NVH.
that doesn't move is faster times, faster laps.
Exactly. The less you can get it to move. So that first recommendation is kind of my guy that's like, I go to the track every few months just to see what it'll do. I mostly drive it on the street. If I end up in Mexico, I end up in Mexico. But generally speaking, I want it to drive fairly OEM. That's a great way to go. But if you start increasing power or wanting to increase your, I shouldn't say increase. If you want to start decreasing your track time as you're adding power, or you're making a ton of power and torque and need to control it more, you can go to the extremes of IRS subframe support braces. I do rear lower control arm bearing kits. That's something BMR offers, to rear camber adjustment lockouts, to rear end tow rods.
That rear bearing I kept talking about.
Right.
Because especially the more power you put down, even if you're not doing it from a stop, but you can move the whole subframe and just destroy your alignment, actually.
Right.
Based on that, because the stock subframe is very actually easy to move and turn side to side without those inserts.
Right. And then in the rear, we'll do on-car adjustable rod and tow rods from BMR as well. We'll do the rear lower control arm vertical links, which we talked about, from BMR as well. And then we'll do the differential bushing kit in big power cars. You're going to add a lot of NVH, right, but we'll change everything in the rear end. And we do the, what are they? The Ford Performance upgraded bearings, toe bearings, I think is what they're called. It's on the tip of my tongue. I'm having a blank moment. We'll do those as well. So there's like 8 pieces we add.
The ones that go into the toe link ones, the ones that go from the knuckle to the toe link.
Yep. Yeah. The ones that the Ford Performance are nicer ones.
Yep. Well, they're actually the exact same one that goes into the knuckle. You just put the same one that that goes in the subframe. You just put the same one in the knuckle. That's the difference.
Right. So, I mean, you can go as simple as that to go in full cradle lockout in the subframes and the rear control arm bearing kits and the camber lockouts and the adjustable tow rods. And you can get pretty extreme with it. There's about 8 pieces for a good rear end outside of, again, half shafts and drive shaft and everything else that you should already be naturally doing to really lock that up. It's going to add a lot of NVH, but you can go pretty extreme. So for the rear end, you could be anywhere from sub $1,000 to, if you do everything, you're probably a little over $2,000 at retail. I'm kind of free thinking that out of my head as I'm kind of looking at some of the notes here on stuff to do. And then when it comes to the front end, we talked about it. Coney yellows is a great option if you don't want to go full coilover, but you want to get off the stock shock or need to get off the stock shock because they're blown out or getting tired, or you got a higher mileage car. Coney yellows are great. They're adjustable. I'll use those in a pinch with the BMR drag springs or a drag spring of your choice. And then a lot of
dampers actually really they're fine, but they'd actually, in my experience, they don't last that long. I use my stock dampers on the track a handful of times, and when I changed them out at like 18,000 miles, they were pretty tired. They weren't dead, but they were pretty tired. I was actually surprised by that low mileage.
Those front struts, that's what I see a lot of is they're just tired, especially if guys are beating on them with a lot of power for a while and there's a lot of weight transfer going on. Because I mean, obviously the big goal in drag is weight transfer. That's why you see guys riding rear bumpers that are super fast, then trying to dial it back. The whole goal is to get the car to squat and get the car to rebound as quickly as possible. And that's the great part about having those Viking adjustable shocks in the rear. But if you're going to go further than that, BMR K member, Steeda K member, depending on what you want to do. Obviously, the BMR K member is going to delete your sway bar. I'm not sure if the Steeda does. I don't run a lot of Steedas. I don't run a lot of BMRs. Obviously, that sway bar is going to change the way the car handles. You need to make sure that you know what you're getting into when you delete that. It'll still handle fine, but corners are going to be a little different. But BMR K members are going to take weight off the car. I basically call it an engine diaper. Like when you look at it, there's not a lot there holding that motor up in the car. It's enough just to hold it up, but it's getting rid of all the excess fat, which is nice. There's no rear trailing arms, no sway bar, so it changes quite a bit. But even if you don't go to the extent of a K member initially, we'll go to Viking coilovers in the front for their setup. And most customers, I get both spring rates, 2 different spring rates. They offer about 6 different spring rates, but a couple of different spring rates to try to dial it in. And there's preload that's adjustable. Actually, Gavin did one of his videos on the black car, I believe. He was putting them on and talking about preload and how it's adjustable. It's a little different than normal coilovers, but that's another upgrade if you're wanting to get serious about it. And it's sub $2,000, but it's north of $1,000. I don't remember the retail off my top of my head. I think it's $1,700 retail, depending on the application. But that again will help with the weight transfer and the rebound going down the drag strip. And you can still make it drive like a Cadillac. That's the great thing about Viking's product that I like, especially their rear shocks, is with that adjustability, you can still make it drive super, super nice on the street by adjusting your rebound and compression. And then you can put it on the track, and it's a little aggressive the way I put it to people, but I'm like, you can make it feel like, hitting a tiny little bump feels like you're going into a 10-foot pothole with how tight you can make the car, where you're like, what the hell did I just hit? Or going down the road, you're like, how big was that pothole? And you look in your side mirror and it's just a little dent in the ground. And you're like, wow, that was terrible. So you can still adjust the fronts and the rears if you're running Vikings products to be comfortable to drive on the street. You're not going to really add any NVH. And then obviously adding in the Viking front coilovers with some sort of subframe is going to help that rebound and weight transfer a little bit more. Even just deleting the sway bar for guys will help with that weight transfer back to front a lot more, just even on a stock K member setup. So, when it comes to drag setups, you can still get it to drive well on the street outside of any added NVH, depending on how extreme you go on that rear end. You still get it to drive like a Cadillac or a factory car, or get it to drive super aggressive and dial it up for your settings, whether you're on ET Street R's in the rear, or Mickey Thompson SS's, or Continental Extreme Contacts, if that's your thing, or 888Rs from Toyo, which is probably my favorite mixed use tire if you're going to be on the street. Yeah, versus I still like the Mickey Thompson ETSS's, but the ETSS's are still a little bit more limiting compared to the 888Rs. But you can be anywhere from
money on tires.
Yeah, you're going to spend money on tires. You can be anywhere from simple setups for the street, sub $1,000 or less, depending on what you get it for. If we're running sales and promos at the time, or contact us to work something out, or if you already have some pieces used or found. To
yeah, I mean, let us know your budget and your goals, and we'll tell you if A, you need to reevaluate your budget, or B, all right, you're within budget.
Yeah, if you call me
options.
If you call me and say I'm going to do everything but half shafts, I'm going to laugh at you. The first thing you should be changing is half shafts. If you're really going to try to
drag that, yes.
Yeah, if you're going to try to beat the crap out.
People laugh at me, but I make over 700 wheel horsepower, and I have stock drive shafts, stock half shafts still, but I don't drag race, so they're fine.
Right, right. There's a big difference, but I mean, if you take drive shaft, half shaft out of it, you can be about $1,000 to get what you need done. Outside of alignment, outside of install, I'm just talking parts cost.
Right.
To you can be, north of $2,000, $3,000. I'd say $3,000 is probably closer to your upper threshold, depending on what you pay for stuff. To get the whole, maybe a little bit more, $3,000 to $4,000 to get the whole car completely changed over to a complete drag car setup, like you're seeing these guys have that are going low eights, sevens. Even mid eights, to really get those numbers down and decrease those 60 foots. And obviously, I won't go into it too deep, but obviously there's different recommendations for Magna Ride cars. You're obviously a little bit more limited on what you can change for Magna Ride cars, or what you do need to change. So if you have a Magna Ride car, feel free to reach out to us, and we can kind of walk you through what we would recommend and what we would change while still utilizing Magna Ride and getting those 1.2, 60 foots in a drag car.
And I think something people don't realize is to get those fast times, it's not always about more horsepower. I mean, more horsepower is always good in drag racing, but to get those 60 foots, suspension can be extremely important.
You can shave off a ton of time just by getting proper suspension. I've had customers that have only been able to cut 1.5, 1.6, 60 foots that think they need to add more power, right, or whatever it might be, the discussions about on their build. To you put good suspension on, they go out and cut low 1.3, 60 foots, and that's obviously making up huge amounts of time at the end of the quarter mile. And they're usually like, "Holy shit! I didn't know the car could go much faster." So suspension is a huge critical part in any way you're using your car: drag, drift, road course, autocross, circle tracks, road courses. That are big and popular. Suspension goes a long way, along, like you said, with good tires. But if you're budgeting for drag, it can be anywhere from $1,000 to, we'll call it $4,000, and you need to make sure you're having a solid conversation with your tuner, people with experience around you that have cars like you want. If you can drive cars, if your buddies are willing to let you drive their cars that are set up different ways, or tiering upwards with more aggressive suspension setups for the drag car, do that, so you kind of get an understanding of what NVH you're going to get.
And what you want to do. That's always something I recommend. No matter, even if you're buying a car, if you can get seat time in it, that's always a huge deal to me, because it lets you know if you're really going to like that or not.
I think there's a big misconception on how much it can cost to get set up with suspension properly, to go to the extremes or just the bare minimums to bring your times down and make it hook better on the street, even if it's in Mexico from a roll, in comparison to some other modifications that are out there, and how much it can actually drastically change what you have going on. And that being said, that's seat time is great. Like you said, that not everybody's going to let you drive their car, but if you can get some seat time to understand NVH, even if you can ride it, understanding that you're going to add a little NVH with different pieces, you're going to give up some of that stock comfort along the way. So if you can't drive somebody else's car, don't be shocked when you get in and you're like, wow, this is.
And some people don't care. They will daily drive a completely horrible riding car. I will not do that personally. I mean, I like driving my car, but I would not daily it. Oh my gosh. I can't do that.
I mean, it's a little different here in Houston. People daily drive 9-second cars here, and you'll see them go down the road.
It's just not.
You'll see them going down the road with a parachute and everything else.
Yeah, I believe it happens here. Not nearly as much as it happens there, but still.
Yeah, so I mean, have a good conversation. Don't be afraid to throw a few parts at it. Some parts are better than not. That's why I said if you're in a drag car and you're budget conscious, put shocks on it, springs on it, vertical links, and a cradle lockout, and you'll be amazed about how much difference you're going to get just from the adjustable rear shock and then locking up the rear end. There's a lot of info on Mustang 6G.
We're happy to help you. There's a lot of Mustang 6G, even the Facebook groups. Between all the trolls and Facebook groups, there's actually a lot of good info.
There can be some good info if you search.
I haven't heard a hit me with your purse joke in a while on the Facebook group, so I guess that's a.
Well, that's just when it comes to stripping bolts and trying to get them out. So, just don't strip bolts. If you do, hit it with your purse, and it might come out a little bit easier. It's there's a lot of toxic shit and all that. I just stay out of it. You don't see me post a lot.
I just read and laugh at it. I don't comment that much on that page, but
I mean,
sometimes I have something applicable.
We pay for our Mustang 6G membership or sponsorship, I should say, not membership. And
6G is a lot better. It doesn't have much.
You don't even see me post on there because I see the toxic shit, or I'll see like 12 comments that are retarded as fuck that don't make sense. YOLO would love that. And I'm just like, I can't respond to this, or people are like, you should really post on them more. I'm like, I can't deal with a lot of that toxic shit or the misinformation that goes around that people take as the gospel. But yeah, I mean, you're welcome to send an email, send a text, give us a call, shoot us a Facebook message, whatever it is. If you've got questions on suspension setups, and Sam and I would be more than happy to help you with the wheelhouse that each of us understands. So if it's road course, autocross, everything that Sam does, drifting, things like that.
If you want to talk to me, send an email. That's the best way for me to get it. If you want to talk to Jeff, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I mean, the best way in general is send an email so that we can make sure that we got enough time to have a proper conversation. That's like one thing I think we do differently is we have a lot of in-depth conversations with our customers to make sure their buying decision is proper. And in the process of doing that, that takes time. So I want to make sure we can dedicate the time to have the proper conversation with you about what you're doing, not just say, oh, buy this, here's a coupon.
Like it's just Jeff answering the phone. He can't always answer the phone. So that's why we do say email, because I mean, we're happy to talk to you on the phone, but sometimes rather than calling us 10 times in a row, because, we're not a call center, we don't have a dedicated person answering the phone. It's just easier to send an email. We could set up a time and definitely give you a call later. Right. So it makes it just easier for everybody. And that way nothing gets lost. Nobody gets forgotten.
Right. And we want to make sure you have the dedicated time to get a proper answer. I could put some salespeople on the phone just to push parts, but I think it's more helpful and a better experience to know what you're getting. In general, I think it's a better experience, and it can also set you up. Like if I understand what your goals are, I can recommend parts or and we'll talk about that here in a second with Boost, but I can recommend a solution and a way to scale that as time moves forward and you can put more money in the car versus just saying, well, you don't have $4,000 to do something. You shouldn't do anything at all until you have the $4,000. I'd rather have an in-depth conversation and say, hey, you got $1,200 right now, put it towards this. You can always upgrade something else a little bit later on.
And apparently a lot of people are about to have $1,200. So
yeah, well, maybe. I don't know how that's going to work out with the tax situation, but hey, it seems like a lot of people are going to have $1,200 to pop out. So, don't get your radios, get your dashes, get your sync 2 to 3 conversions, get your manifolds, get your XM radio upgrades, get your fuel systems. Make sure to contact us about fuel system recommendations and things like that. We'll be happy to work with you guys on anything. We try to make sure that everybody's getting a personal attention and experience on things. But I guess we can transition from that to, we might as well just talk about Boost at the same time. I don't see a reason to make a separate episode.
So what are we going to say about Boost here? What are we trying to accomplish? Because I know we've talked some about Boost, but we've talked some about Boost. I still about some stuff.
Yeah, I still get a lot of questions about what should I do with my setup, PD versus centrifugal versus turbos versus how much boost is safe for different levels.
Whipple.
Yeah, the like my God, you can't make that much power on 93 octane seems to be a interesting topic point that I hear a lot about that people have misconceptions about. Yes, we prefer E85. I'll put that out there right now.
As somebody who is 93, I definitely agree. I prefer E85 for most cars. I just have been too lazy to do a fuel system. E85, as everybody knows, is honestly, you can make more power, but B, you can actually make more power, and it's safer than making less power on 93. Correct.
But the big misconception is 93 is shit. You can't do anything with it. And that's hot garbage. Garbage. There's too many people in YouTube comments and Facebook and all this shit that they see a power number and they instantly relate it to E85. And I think that can be part of this discussion. That's a crock of horse shit. The power number is based on efficiency. How much air you can shove into the motor and how quickly the air can leave the motor is your power number. There's not a person on this planet that if I looked at you and said, if you could run 9 pounds of boost and make 2,000 wheel horsepower on pump gas, would you say no? And they'd be like, hell yeah, I'd love to make 2,000 with horsepower. But they don't hear the first portion. So what you need to understand is quit looking at horsepower numbers and deciding if a fuel is appropriate for that or not. That is the biggest misconception that's out there. And here's a great example. Let's just take a 2018 Mustang, for example. And I'm going to shoot this to you, Sam. You and I haven't talked about this before, and you can kind of give me your initial reaction as a car guy that's boosted and not necessarily in depth in the weeds with boost like I am. So if you go buy a Roush Phase 1 2020 Mustang, we'll use 2020, 18 up, a Gen 3 motor, okay? And they're selling you that 2020 Roush Phase 1 kit that, I don't know what they rated at, like 675 crank horsepower, so like 580 at the tire. And I told you that you can make 500, we're just going to use that as a round number, 580 wheel horsepower on 13 pounds of boost and keep your factory warranty. What would you say to that? Hell yeah. Great. That's fantastic. Right.
Sure. Factory warranty. Right.
Okay. And then let's say that same, remember, that's 13 pounds of boost. Then let's say, okay, we're going to put a Paxton on the car. Paxtons are super popular. We're going to run a 3.6 inch pulley and we're going to run it on 93 octane and you're going to make 740 wheel horsepower. You'd be okay with that, right? Because it's a 3.6 pulley. It's a Paxton. It's good to go, right? And I've got tons of cars that we've done. Okay. Well, you're running that Paxton at 14-ish pounds of boost, 14 to 15 pounds of boost on a 3.6 pulley on 93 octane. So keep that in mind. And we're now at 14 to 15 pounds of boost on 93 octane. Now, if I told you, if you buy your 2020 Mustang and we put, let's say, a Hellhorse twin turbo kit on it, because I have all the data on that, right? Mm-hmm. And you could run 12 pounds of boost and make 850 wheel horsepower on 93 octane. How would you feel about that?
Well, that sounds good too.
So the big misconception there is people see the horsepower number. They go, holy shit, you're making 840, 850 on pump gas. No, you can't do that. It's all
people
about
always
efficiency.
Think more boost, more power, which is true, but not true, because every situation is different. If you're leaving everything the same and you're just pulling down, adding boost, okay, yes, technically that will give you more power. But for example, on my Whipple, for running 11 pounds of boost, I can make 750 wheel horsepower on 93, right, with my 2016. But you're going to run more boost on a Roush or on Paxton to make the same amount of power. You're going to have parasitic loss from spinning a belt. So the big misconception is people watch these videos, they see these posts. I'm not saying E85 isn't the better choice. I'm all about running E85 if you have that ability, and fuel systems are a different discussion for a different day. But the reality of the situation is you got people that just talk out of their ass. And I hate to call anybody out that's talked out of their ass to begin with, but you can't look at me and say you're okay with running a Paxton on a 3.6 pulley with an open blower at 14 to 15 pounds of boost to make 740 on 93, and you're totally okay with that. And then look at me with a straight face and say, well, if you can run 12 pounds of boost to make 850 on pump gas, it's not safe. People need to understand the entire thing. Efficiency determines the horsepower number. That's why I always use the 9 PSI for 2,000 horsepower. If you could do it on pump gas, you totally will. You need to understand the limits of the fuel you're using. You need to understand the efficiencies of your application, the boost, your motor, your setup, your tuner, everything. And obviously talk to your tuner about that type of stuff. But it's crazy how many comments and questions I get where people are like, oh man, 840, you need to be on E85. And I see that a ton.
And that's just not an applicable situation. There is more to it than a horsepower number. And I see that a lot. And I see a lot of people get stuck in the trap. I mean, I see people get stuck in that trap. They're like, well, I'm running 12 pounds of boost and everybody says I need 85 because I'm making 800 wheel horsepower with a turbo kit. No, I would love for you to run E85 because it's more consistent and stable. But in reality, you're still running less boost in the Roush kit. You're still running less boost in the Whipple kit that's making 700 and something wheel horsepower. You're still running less boost in the Paxton kits and the centrifugal kits that make 750 on pump gas. The difference is you have more efficiency with turbos at a lower boost level, making more power. And that's a huge misconception that they have. I'm not saying I don't like Whipple. I'm not saying I don't like PD. I don't like PD blowers. I'm not saying I don't like centrifugals. You need to understand what you're getting yourself into and how it actually works. You need to educate yourself. You need to make sure the people that are giving you the information are, your tuner, Lund, Palm Beach Dyno, VMP, Justin and Chuck over there, AED, Sean over at AED, whoever you're using, you need to have a discussion with them and make sure you really understand. You can have the discussion with me for all I care what you're getting. Quit listening to the comments that are like 850 can't do it on pump gas, because I'll be honest with you, Rob Shoemaker has tuned, I won't say the shop name. They've published it, but they've made 1,000 wheel horsepower on 93 octane on a twin turbo GT350, and it's completely safe and still running. I think it's been running now like a year and a half on pump gas.
Something when you do go through the tuning process for your whatever kit you're doing is be very honest with your tuner about what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to get absolute max power out of it, or are you trying to get more drivability out of it? Because I have gone through that where I've had tunes that, and I have multiple tunes for my car now where I have a tune, if I want to squeeze every horsepower out of it, I can put that tune on there and it doesn't really drive well at the lower speeds, which that's how a lot of drag cars are. I know the high horsepower drag cars, you're trying to barely putz along. They just don't like it. But then I have another tune, which is less horsepower, but it's much better driving overall. The throttle response is more linear. The boost, I have more of a range of boost, and and there's a big difference there between what you're doing and what blower you go with, if you go with turbos, because PD blowers, for example, a lot of times they just like to hop right in the boost all of a sudden, versus turbos are very smooth. And so there's so many options that it's hard to pick what's best for you. I've gone through this with multiple people and myself even, and I to be honest, I just like blower wine. That's why I went with a Whipple. But
right. Well, no, listen, we've talked about it before.
Everybody
there's an application for everybody. There's an application for everybody's budget, as long as you have the budget for boost. I mean, if you bring me $1, you can't have boost, but within reason,
it is expensive.
Within reason, there is a application for everybody. We've talked about that before. We go in depth of those conversations with customers. At least I do. And I get a lot of customers that are like, wow, you're shining a lot of light on different things. You need to understand what's the goal with the car, what you're trying to do with the car, how the car is going to be used, what fuel is available. And I'll be glad to have that discussion with you. But, one of the biggest dysfunctional statements that I see that I wanted to make sure we hit on is the horsepower number doesn't determine the type of fuel you should be running, period. End of statement.
Right.
It's all about efficiency of the car. There are boost levels that are no longer safe on 93 octane. Yes, everybody would prefer E85. Get it, hands down. But if your availability is 93, you shouldn't be sitting there going, gee, I'm only going to be able to make 600 or 700 wheel horsepower on this, when you can make more than that. It's all based on the setup you're running, how you run that setup, and how you tune it. But there's just such a big misconception that the horsepower number is the word of God on what fuel it needs to be. There's a lot of people that buy into that, and it's just not the case. If I can give a customer a car that at 12 pounds of boost is going to make 800, 820 wheel horsepower safely, tuned properly, tuned safely by a reputable tuner, I'm okay with them having that car and enjoying it and making it more power. I don't know if it's a jealousy thing from other people that don't have that, but obviously there's parasitic loss and belt driven. Some things are more efficient than the others. Turbos are more efficient. A positive displacement blower are actually extremely efficient. If you've ever looked at a dynograph of them, the horsepower curve is still going up when it goes off the end of the chart. I mean, they're crazy efficient. Absolutely. But you still got some parasitic loss from spinning a belt.
Sure, of course.
You're robbing horsepower to spin a blower, but that doesn't mean it's a bad setup.
They say it's 70 horsepower. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. But I see all these people are like, oh my gosh, I'll see them on Facebook all the time. They're like, oh man, you're making 800 wheel horsepower, you're making 850 wheel horsepower, you have to be on E85. That horsepower number requires E85. That's not the case. Quit buying into that hype. Make sure to have a conversation with your tuner, have a conversation with your vendor. If it's us, you're more than welcome to call me, have a conversation. If you want to talk to Rob Shoemaker, we can have a conversation with Rob Shoemaker and he'll tell you the same thing. You need to understand efficiency. If you can make more horsepower with less boost than what somebody's willing to sell you off the lot, why would you not want to? And obviously, if you're running less boost, it's a safer platform. I would much rather have a 93 car running 12 pounds of boost than a 93 car having to run 14 or 15 pounds of boost, because there's more room for error and issue to pop up at a lower boost number than shoving that amount of boost through the car. I mean, there's something to be said for that. But, the big point is don't look at just the horsepower number. You need to understand the whole situation as a whole. And if you don't know what you're talking about, just shut the fuck up and talk to somebody that knows what they're talking about. Don't buy into everything that's on 6G and Facebook and things like that. Talk to your tuner, talk to somebody with experience. But horsepower number is not the gauge for fuel. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, one interesting note too is, and I might be alone in this logic, but like, for example, I have a 750 wheel horsepower tune. I've run it on the dyno. However, I actually pull it up and I run a 680 wheel horsepower tune because I like to take my car on the road course, and it drives better with less horsepower. It's a little bit safer when I'm getting it that hot. And I just prefer that. And some people might not want to go absolutely every max horsepower. And you can actually save money doing that by doing something differently. But that's just something I wanted to throw in there, because a lot of people do want to squeeze every horsepower up. But then you have people like me who, while I can have the high horsepower tune if I really want to and pulley down, I choose not to. And I really like the car, and it's pretty quick at 680. A lot of people, if you haven't driven cars that have 600, 700, 800 horsepower, I mean, you can tell the difference between 680 and 750, but 680 is still really quick. It's a fast car. It's
a lot of car. Most supercars that people are buying are coming with 650,
right,
600 wheel horsepower. So I mean, you're talking supercar power levels. And yeah, there's an application for everybody, and there's power levels for everybody. Yeah, and the great thing, my big thing about loving turbos is turn the boost controller down, make 600, 650, and then, if you find yourself in a position you need to really turn that bad boy up, then turn that bad boy up, and it's power on tap, it's power on buttons. Still love Whipples, I'm still a huge Paxton pusher. If you're looking for a way to get into boost and daily drive a car that makes 740, 750 wheel horsepower and, makes its power on the top end because you're a roll guy, man, it's still hard to beat a centrifugal blower for the money. And we've talked about that before, but one of those things on all three of those PD blower, centrifugal, turbo setups is quit looking at horsepower numbers and the fuel ratings. That's been a huge misconception the last 2 or 3 months that I've seen in all sorts of social media facets. And also, to that extent, you need to trust your tuner. If your tuner is saying, hey, we're good to go on 93 octane at this level, I'm comfortable tuning up to here on 93 octane, then trust your tuner. If you don't trust your tuner, then you're either with the wrong tuner, or you need to get some better education from your tuner about why they're doing what they're doing. No major tuner out there is going to tell you no and trying to get more information about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're recommending what they're recommending, or why they're only willing to do what they're willing to do. You know what I mean? Like, I've never run into any tuner in the dozens of tuners I've dealt with for customers or myself, or really just customers that I've had conversations with that have had questions about parts in the car, that isn't willing to give their customer a better explanation of what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. They're not going to tell you how they're doing it so that you could go out and tune yourself, but they'll have a conversation with you. But that seems to be the 2020 trend, is the cars making big power on non-E85 and everybody freaking out because of the horsepower number and not looking at the entire situation. There's a lot that goes into that decision. You can talk to your tuner about it, but quit telling people that running their car at 12 pounds of boost on pump gas with a big power number, if they're turbo, or 10 pounds of boost or 11 pounds of boost or whatever, the boost number doesn't matter. If their tuner is saying they're okay with it on 93 octane and it makes a big number, quit using the number as justification for the fuel system. That has nothing to do with it. Efficiency, there's a lot more to efficiency than what people realize. Right? Air in, air out. That determines your horsepower number. The faster you shove it in, the faster you shove it out, the more power you're going to make. There's a huge difference in efficiency, especially like you mentioned. Let's just say there's a 75 horsepower loss between a belt-driven car and a turbo car. Well, it should make 75 horsepower more at the same boost level with the same fuel. I wouldn't see people freaking out about that if they understood it. You know what I mean?
Right.
You just gotta.
You want to explain why E85 is safer? I mean,
it's more octane. It's a more stable, higher octane. It's a higher octane fuel. It's more
probably know better than I do. I mean, I definitely know something, but
yeah, it's just a more consistent fuel. Without getting into the weeds on it, it's a more consistent fuel. E85 is basically I think it's 107 octane rating. Obviously, test your E. The federal standards have changed. I think 55. They can go as low as 55% now, and then also make sure you understand that it doesn't have to test E85 every single time for it to run well. Your tuner will tell you what they're comfortable with. They'll tell you like, hey, as long as it's E75 or higher, I'm comfortable with you running this tune.
Well, a lot of people have flex fuel tunes too.
And a lot of people have flex fuel tunes if they're in A, not in boost. Every major tuner in this game for Mustangs is giving you a dedicated 93 and a dedicated E85 tune. But it's a higher octane. It's a more stable fuel. You can add more timing because it's got more octane. It's a higher octane fuel. It's no different than running like MS 109.
And the other big thing is it's higher octane for sure, but you're also it has less energy content, so you have to put more of it in to get the same amount of power. So therefore you run cooler, and running cooler is huge and paramount in safety as well as getting more power because you're less likely to pre-detonate if you're running cooler.
Heat is a killer in everything, whether it's in your fuel, your engine temps, anything like that. Pre-det will kill your motor just as quickly as too much timing or anything else or bad fuel. And obviously you get more power, better track times out of a cooler running car. So E85 will lower your operating temps a little bit. It's going to require more fuel. I think the rule of thumb is 33% more fuel is used compared to like 93. It's more stable. It's got more octane and it's more consistent. And when I talk about consistency, there's different tiers of gas. There's winter blend gases. There's summer blend gases. Different parts of the country get different things. So like Florida, Houston area, we pretty much get what's called tier 1 gas all year round. So that would be for a lot of you northern guys, summer gas all year round. But if you live somewhere where it gets cold or it snows, well, I guess cold is snowing, but iced up and snow a ton where it's cold all the time, not just a temporary amount of time, you might end up with a really low grade fuel that has a lot more additives into it to not allow the fuel to freeze in the tank and allow the car to start on really cold days. That fuel is not the same as summer blend when it comes to your tune. That's why your tuner always will tell you, hey, don't be afraid to send logs if you notice something different, because that fuel will change. Whereas if you've got E85 or Ignite E90 or Ignite 114 or anything that's a stable fuel that's always consistent, it's a lot easier to tune for. It's a lot more predictable as well. So you need to be aware in that 93 octane discussion with boost as well of, do you get different tiers? And most of the major manufacturers for fuel, 76, Chevron, BP, ExxonMobil, all the companies, if you go to their website or contact them, they'll actually tell you where to find the information on their website for what tier grade you have, like during what months. Like, are you a tier 1, tier 2 area? Do you drop down? Do you live in like Montana and you're going to get tier 3 or tier 4 gas that you need to be more worried about? You can get that information. That information is pretty readily available from fuel manufacturers. So just make sure you know what you're getting and how you're getting it. That's again why people prefer E85 outside of all the heat properties and the more timing and a more stable fuel is that stability. If you buy E85 and it tests, we'll say E80 or higher for this conversation, or E85 or higher, it's always going to be consistent. There's not really a winter blend E85. Now you could live in an area that has E85 where the federal standard is now 55%. And if it's colder, they're making it closer to E50 or something like that, because it's very hard to start E85 in the middle of winter. So they'll lower the rating to allow cars to start as well.
And that brings into
your area. I mean, you got to make sure you know what's in your area, and you got to make sure you're testing. I'm not saying you got to You got to make sure you're testing and understand what you're getting, because it'll change on your area, and the fuel companies will provide you whatever you're looking for fuel wise. They have the information. They can tell you. If they don't, they can tell you who's distributing it in the area, like the tanker drivers, and you can contact them and they will be able to tell you usually what tier of gasoline they're drop off in certain pumps.
That brings me into thinking about something else. You said cooling. Maybe this is a topic for another day, but I feel like cooling is something people don't think about, especially in the road course area. But it's something that I definitely neglected at first, and I've kind of learned about it as time goes on. And luckily, these cars are good about not destroying themselves. But I think that's a topic we should bring up. I'm not if people are interested in it, but.
Well, there's a lot of ways to talk about cooling. We can talk about trans coolers. We can talk about cooling systems. We can talk about killer chiller kits. We can talk about guys, which is more rare in the Mustang world, but guys that run meth injection to try to cool things down. Water to air or air to water intercoolers, air to air cooler efficiencies. How we build our custom coolers for our turbo kits, and the IAT rise is minimal compared to other intercoolers on the market that are air to air, and how that works and why you need it to work, and how to lower IATs and some benefits of that. We can certainly cover that in a different conversation and topic.
For sure, because there's a lot of stuff that people don't know about the S550 and cooling related things.
Or just cars in general and cooling, whether it's, a SRT or a Hellcat or a Demon or a ZL1 or a Z06 or...
Well, with the S550, for example, there's no coolant temp sensor and there's no oil temp sensor. GT350 has an oil temp sensor, but but they still give you those numbers, but it's just guessing. It's just going off cylinder head temp. So that's something a lot of people don't realize. I think it's a real.
Well, we could also cover why there's IAT relocation harnesses for Whipple and things like that.
Right, absolutely.
And talk about that. But I definitely think that's probably a good topic for a different day as we kind of come near the end of our topics for this day and time-wise to not keep people's attention forever. But, quick impact review on everything that we've talked about is, yes, if you're looking for a Hellhorse package and you qualify for 0 for 84 and find a vehicle that fits the 0 for 84 model, you can do it through Joe Myers Ford for a Hellhorse 850 or 1200 at 0%, pending you meet all the conditions. We're still shipping. We're seeing a little bit of interruption from shipping carriers, but nothing that's impacting us as a business from shutting down when it comes to this COVID-19 thing that's going on. Where are we at with radio lead times again right now, Sam? Roughly,
they've gone up a little bit. It's hard to tell. I'm telling people 6 weeks right now. It might be less. If it's a 2019, it's hopefully less. The bezels, of course, are always the hard thing to get. I've actually just recently gotten a handful, so that'll help me a little bit. So we're going. It's just so hard to tell in the lead time. So right now I'm saying 6 weeks, but it could be shorter, but it could be longer. So just know you're in for a wait. It's such a popular kit. People, and let me be honest, Sync 3 is great. You'll love the kit once you put it in. I could not have a car without, or a Ford that came optional with Sync 3. I couldn't have one without it. It is a good system. So, but that's where we are.
And where are we at with dash lead times? Are we seeing any effect from getting clusters from Ford or our other vending partners for dashes right now with everything that's going on, or is that staying about the same?
Currently, cluster and cluster parts are fine. I haven't heard any lead time on cluster parts, even right-hand drive bezels I've been able to get, though I think Ford's been stocking them for me, but still, those used to be a little longer lead time thing, but I've been keeping one in stock. Clusters themselves seem to be okay. They were a little slower there for a while. They seem to be okay right now. We'll see about the GT500 ones. I actually ordered a GT500 one yesterday, but I haven't even heard back from Ford yet on if that went through. So we'll see what happens there. But I assume United Radio, who ships the clusters, is open, but I believe they're in New York, so there's a chance they aren't open, which would
impact it quite a little bit.
It could impact it to an extent if I run out of stock.
We still have those on sale for $250 off for anybody that's still listening at this point, 90 minutes in. Those are still on sale for, as of right now, for $250 off. I'm going to continue to do that. I guess the big thing we didn't talk about that we can wrap up with is the spring bash sale. I'm surprised we didn't talk about that, but spring bash sale is going on right now. If you buy a turbo kit, a Whipple kit. What did all that include with that? If you buy a R-Twin turbo kit, a Whipple kit, or a Paxton or Vortec kit, and you buy Boundary oil pump gears and crank sprocket at the same time, when you pay for the oil pump gear and crank sprocket install with us, you'll get 50% off the boost kit installation. And if it's a turbo kit, that includes, controller install and setup as well. Obviously your car has to be installed here in Houston, but we get customers all the time that ship cars down here, just so you guys are aware. That promo is running until May 1st. Kind of did it as a tax day sale, but now with, everything else coming in, it might be nice. Typically that's going to save somebody between $800 and $1,000. Generally speaking,
good chunk of change.
It's a good chunk of change to put towards something else, or maybe get.
If you're getting that $1,200, might put you over the edge to be able to afford it, right? So
I can't mention discount percentages, but I've got Whipple superchargers on sale right now until April 3rd, and then 2020. Just in case somebody listens to this in the future, 2020. There's some promos on the Hellhorse twin turbo kits. The YouTubers that run our twin turbo kit, their coupon code works on it automatically. But if you don't watch any of those guys and want a discount, give me a call. And then I'm working some deals on the add-on parts for Paxton Vortec kits, like injectors and things like that. So just send us an email, give us a phone call, shoot a text message, whatever it is to talk about that. But that's Spring Bash sale. If you want more information, if you go to any of the Instagram posts, well, most of the Instagram posts recently, I usually make it the second picture. If you swipe over, you can see a little quick brief introduction, or send us a text message, email, or give us a phone call about that. And I think we're there. Dashes are on sale still. The Spring Bash sale going on. Everything's kind of working as normal. And I guess until we do episode 5, we'll kind of leave it there, huh?
Sounds good to me.
Well, it's always good having you.
Yeah, good conversation today.
So it's not me just talking to myself. And
right.
We appreciate all of you guys listening. If you've made it this far, stay tuned for episode 5. That should probably be coming, I don't know, probably within 3 or 4 days of me actually getting this one live. We've already got some topics for that one lined out as well. And we appreciate all of you.
Send in your topics.
Send in your topics as well. If you got questions that you need answered, or drop them on an IG post and I post it. And as always, you can reach us at 832-791-2293. I don't even know my own phone number. 832-791-2993. 832-791-2993 is the business number. Support at hellhorseperformance.com. Or reach out to us on social media for anything we can do for you, or have a conversation and lead you in the right direction. Thanks for tuning in. And Sam, I will talk to you later.
Sounds good.